Good morning and welcome back to Diving Deep into Battletech here on Gaming with ADHD. This is our, we're going to say more or less weekly live stream if Skaz can ever bother to show up, where we are diving deep into the rules for Battletech to talk, to actually figure out the rules, see that we're playing correctly, and take comments from the chat, and see what you all have to say. And as always, always, I mean, this is our second episode. I am joined today by Skaz. How you doing today, sir?
I'm all right, but it's not morning. It's 6 o'clock at night. It's rather evening-ish, so I'm doing okay for this evening.
Look, it's morning somewhere.
I mean, somewhere, yes.
Right. See? So, who knows? I mean, we could have Seraphis in the chat at some point. I don't know. He's in Australia. It's like 10 a.m., So just saying, it's possible.
It's your show. You say what you want. I'm just saying I'll show up more on time when you can get times right for what you're greeting people with. How's that? I mean, what are you going to do?
I mean, technically, you're the one that canceled the last 2 weeks, so it's not really anything I did wrong.
Well, I mean, there's been other things going on. I got to take kids places and stuff. And the wife's already texted me about, I hate driving kids all over the place. What are you doing?
Isn't that what moms are supposed to do, though?
Yes, but, dads have to help out as well. So, especially when you have 3 kids.
I didn't say dads can't help out. I just think it's funny. Oh, I hate driving them all around. It's like, that's kind of a mom thing to do.
I mean, I'm more than willing to send my wife a message back saying, well, then stop signing them up for so many activities. But then again, you may not ever find my body if I do. So.
That's completely fair. And you know what? I just realized I didn't bother sharing this anywhere on any of the socials. So, anyways, how about while I share this out real quick, why don't you tell everyone about our last game of Battletech?
Our last game of Battletech. Oh, it was exciting. We had 6 of us that got together and played a game. 20,000 BV per person. We had 3 of us running clans. We had 3 of us running inner sphere. And then we had 1 person on the clan side who showed up with 3 Bane 3s with 9 LRM-15s each.
8.
Okay. And well, he'd start shooting, and we'd all just devolve into just talking or doing something else because it would take his turn 20 minutes to complete shooting one of Brian's mechs. So, with all that, we got through 3 or 4 turns. We had a lot of fun. We had a lot of casualties on one side. We had no casualties on another side, and we had a lot of missiles expended. So, all in all, good fun as always.
I did have a lot of fun, but holy crap, that's ridiculous. Like that. The number of missiles was just ridiculous.
Mm-hmm.
I realized that it's totally legal within the rules, but still.
I had time to walk to go get a drink and come back before his turn would have finished. That's how long it took. Just saying.
I totally agree. But no, it was really good though. It was I'm glad we finally got back to the table. It's been quite a while since we've done that.
Yes.
Not for lack of trying, but let's be honest, most of us.
You could invite more people over more often.
I was just gonna say, most of us are in our 40s, and so coordinating is not always the easiest.
Coordinating is never the easiest. I mean, there's always 18 million things going on. But you're right. We should try more often.
Right. So, but we also had a new guy, which was good, who went away waiting to come back for the next game.
Right. He was good. We enjoyed having him.
Yeah, so I think that was an added bonus that no matter what, there is still some bit of appeal, even to new players who, let's be honest, this is not his thing.
No. We had a conversation about somebody else's model collection while he was there, and he was trying to learn more about a different game that he didn't play that somebody else did play while we were trying to teach him Battletech than he did about Battletech. But he still had fun, which is all
right. Well, and it also kind of showed me some like one of the big flaws in some of these games, especially like 40 years worth of lore and and world building and development, like trying to come up with just a simple synthesis of, this is what the game is. This is why it works. This is why you're going to have this stuff that kind of sucks. This is why the other guys are going to have the stuff that's kind of cool. This is how we balance it out. And like having to go through all of that, it's like, oh, invite the new guy. It'll be fine. And then I'm having to explain all of that. I'm like, okay, this is taking way too long.
We talked a lot about in the first episode about the fact that Battletech was nice and portable. It's not real overly complex. You've only got one set of dice. But when you get into playing a full game from somebody who's never played it before, okay, there's a lot of explaining to do. So it's part of the benefit of the game being infinitely deep. So there's lots of different things you can do, like we talked about. But it's also part of the pain of explaining to somebody that's never played before how to play the game.
Right. It absolutely. And it was just something that I hadn't thought about prior to going into these deep dives. But then getting into that game and realizing it was a bit of a shock. So anyways, I'm still glad that we got to do it, and absolutely we're gonna invite the replacement Ben along. I love the fact that we can call someone replacement Ben and they not get offended by it.
It is what it is.
I mean, original Ben was a little grumpy, but
Yeah, original Ben would only been grumpy if we had said we were all using quads, and he wasn't there to take advantage of it. But
exactly. So, all right. So, let's see. Anything else we should yammer about before we start diving into this?
You finished painting my stuff?
You mean basing your stuff?
That's part of painting.
I don't consider that part of painting, really. Yes, I realize you put paint on it, but for some reason my brain doesn't call that painting.
So the answer is no.
The answer is no.
Shocked.
I don't think you're very shocked.
No, not at all.
All right. Well, with Chris's chastisement for me not getting his models finished out of the way, I guess we could get into it for the day. Before we do, folks, do make sure you're subscribed to the channel. We try to do this, I try to put out videos each week covering all sorts of gaming content, whether it's miniature reviews or deep dives or just me sitting around painting miniatures. Love for you to come along, see what we have to share. More deep dives are coming. Battletech is going to go on for, at least a few more weeks. Yes, there'll be a couple extra breaks in there. But make sure you're subscribed so that you don't miss out on any of that. Also, One thing I will say, if you are interested in picking up some of the Battletech rules yourself, there are some links down below to Amazon and DriveThruRPG. They do help out the channel a little bit if you choose to use them, but you are under no obligation to do so, and I'm just happy to have you here regardless. So, with all of that out of the way, let's get into it. So, what are we talking about today, Chris?
Oh, looks like we're talking about the basics of the game, which is movement.
Movement. All right. Movement's not a big deal in Battletech, right?
I mean, it's only the basic part of the game of how everything else falls in line. It's not too much. I mean,
yes. Anyway, that was my bad joke, folks. You should be used to it by now. Yeah, obviously movement is a big deal. Getting your mechs into position, making sure that you are situated in such a way that you can shoot the other guy better than he can, all comes down to movement. So that's what we're going to talk about today. Chris, why don't you start us off?
all right, let's do this. So let's start off with movement. In the movement phase, battle mechs have the opportunity to change their position on the map sheet. Movement modes. Mechs are assigned movement actions in initiative order. See sequence of play, page 6. Every mech must be assigned one and only one of the movement modes available to it. In general, the more hexes a mech moves, the harder it is to be hit. Modes that provide more movement points, MP, thus help keep a mech safe. However, such modes generate more heat and make it so that a mech has a harder time hitting with its own attacks. Minimum movement. A mech that intends to use the minimum movement rule must run. See page 11.
Yeah, we'll get to that one in a second. Actually, that one I thought was kind of interesting is that it's kind of intuitive, I think, that you're either going to walk or run. But that was one of the things that came up with replacement Ben is he's like, "Oh, I'm going to walk, well then I'm going to run and do some of the," and it's like, no, you have to pick one, and it's something simple, but realizing that you actually have to specify that is kind of a big deal. So yes, folks, make sure that you're actually declaring it.
Right. It's that whole indication of what you plan to do, which is binding, which is important in this game because that way you make sure that somebody can't change what they're going to do based off what you do. So that's a big part of the winning the initiative role.
Yeah, you know what? Actually, the binding thing that you bring up, that is actually a really big point. Especially, it's going to come a lot more into play when we get into like the actual combat section of the rules. Like again, with that last game that we played, the amount of stuff that we do where we're just playing it really fast and loose. Whereas if you actually look at the rules and where you're supposed to declare things and the fact that those things that you declare still take effect and are still, binding on you even after the fact really is a big deal. So, it may be something simple like movement, but you do need to make sure that you are declaring it and, remembering what you declared.
It's just that it's that deep part of the tactical part. It's that deep tactical part of the game. When you think about it, if I shoot at Brian with 4 mechs and say that's what I'm going to do, and my first Gauss rifle shot blows his head off, are my other mechs going to have time in that 10-second blip that is the real world equivalent of time that a turn takes? No, they can't do that. They can't switch. They've already started firing at them. So all that happens simultaneously, which is how you have to remember it when you do that binding requirement, because it's not like you can see something, adjust what happens to it, and then go. If that was the case in a real world simulation like this, your mech would be slagged already at that point because they'd already have switched to you and blown you apart. That doesn't work.
Right. I mean, exactly. Like that's one of the key things to remember is it's all simultaneous, but it is a tabletop game. We can't literally do everything at the exact same time, not without it getting even messier. Right. So, anyways, all right. Let's see. All right, standing still. A mech that stands still remains in the hex in which it started the turn. It may not expend movement points that turn, even to change its facing. Choosing this mode does not make a mech immobile. However, this mode can be assigned to any mech, even immobile units. As choosing this mode for an immobile mech still uses a movement selection, this is a good way to put off assigning actions to your more useful mobile mechs until later in the initiative order. So then you'll see down here that if you are standing still, basically there are no modifiers and no heat generated for that particular mech.
Going back to our game with all the LRMs, when our friend that was using the 3 Banes with all those LRMs, he would just find a good firing position, sit there and say, okay, I'm stationary, because he didn't want to take the modifier for moving and shooting when he had a good platform to shoot from. So it's a tactical thing that allows for you to receive benefits of not gaining heat and not gaining any target modifiers to your own targets, but also makes you really easy to be shot. So you have to use it carefully.
Yeah, exactly. It's really easy to hit a stationary target as opposed to one that's on the move. Or so I've been told. All right, grab walking for us.
Walking. A walking mech may expend a number of MP up to its walking MP rating. Mechs may walk backwards. Target number modifier as attacker +1. Target number modifier as target based on hexes traveled. See the attack modifiers table, which we'll get to later. Heat generated 1 total, not per hex traveled. So this talks back to that paragraph we did up at the top that says that mechs moving generates more heat. It's not a significant amount of heat. 1 heat total when you have usually at least 10 to 20 to 40 or so heat sinks is not massive, but it can add up if you have problems or if you're firing all those energy weapons that your mech has.
Oh yeah, I mean it may be 1, but when you have weapons that generate 35 heat and you have 30 heat sinks, okay, wait a second, what are you going to drop because you decided you were going to move? Or when we get into other movement modes, and it gets even worse. So
right, that when you get onto the heat scale, we start showing the heat distribution. You'll see that on the lower levels of the heat modifier, +1 modifier can take you from something as bad as +1 heat or +1 to hit to plus or -1 to movement, which means you can't move as far. So you can really stack a lot of problems with just a +1 add-on if you are overheating your mech to a significant degree.
Right. So, and then also don't forget, folks, if your mech only has 1 leg, you're only allowed to walk. See, that's one thing. Again, there's all these little things that my brain sometimes has a hard time wrapping around. And it's like, your mech lost a leg. You're down. Why are you still standing? Why do you get to stand up?
Well, I mean, you don't stay standing when you lose your leg, and we're getting ahead of ourselves here, but when you lose your leg, you fall over automatically. You take your pallet damage. You have to stand back up at a modifier. So it can be done, which I think is why it's in there, is just to cover the rule in case somebody actually does it. But it is difficult to do, to your point.
I know. They should be down. Anyways, that's my rant. Go for it. Tell us about running.
Running. A running mech may expend a number of MP up to its running MP rating. A mech cannot run backwards. A mech's running MP rating is equal to its walking MP times 1.5 rounded up. Target modifier as attacker +2. Target modifier as target based on hex traveled. See the attack modifiers table, page 19. Heat generated 2 total, not per hex traveled. So if you think about this, just like it's harder for you to do things like type on your smartphone when you're walking, it's even harder for you to type on your smartphone when you're running. That's how they do this for shooting in Battletech, is that it's a little bit more difficult to do this when you're running around as fast as you can go.
I actually really like that example. It's very hard to pilot your mech and text on your cell phone. It's much harder to run in your mech and text on your cell phone.
Right. Pro life tip not related to Battletech. If your wife is a runner and you happen to need to text her in the middle of her run, she's likely going to get angry at you because she can't run and text at the same time, or go the example.
True facts. Heaven forbid you actually call her on the phone, then she can just talk through her Bluetooth headphones. No, she's even angrier about that.
Right. It's almost like we're married to people that have done this, and we've experienced this sometimes in the past, and we may even continue to do so just to get said reaction out. Oh, no, never mind. We'd never do such a thing like that.
I'll be honest. I don't do it intentionally. It doesn't mean it doesn't happen, though.
I can neither confirm nor deny that sometimes no, never mind. Anyways.
But that's because you're also a bit of a troll.
A bit?
Yes. All right. Read the last two little bits on the running.
Critical damage. If a mech uses running MP, each of the following forces a piloting skill roll after its movement in order to avoid falling. Critical hit to the gyro or critical hit to a hip. If mech reduces a mech's walking MP rating, the player must recalculate its running MP rating. Water. Mechs cannot enter a depth 1 or deeper water hex while running, whether the mech is already in water or not. Though a running mech may change facing in one and or move from a water hex to a land hex.
Okay. All right. I know that I need to be better about this rule because I always just treat water more or less as what?
Open terrain.
Well, like a hill. It's like, oh, it's depth 1. Okay, well, I have to do +1. Actually, I think I know I am missing things. So, okay, so you have to walk when you get, or you have to walk when changing.
When going into water. You can run out of water, but you can't run into water. You are the little kid at the beach that wants to run into the ocean. They run into the ocean and they have to stop as the waves come and run into them and push them back.
Okay. No, yeah, you can. Mechs cannot enter a depth 1 or deeper water hex while running. So when you're going down. Wait a second. No, because it says whether the mech
can't run.
Oh.
Unless you're running out of the water. So you can't enter a depth 1 or deeper water hex while running. So if you're in water and you're going from depth 1 to depth 1, you cannot enter depth 1 while running. That means you can't run while you're in water. You can run out of the water, but you can't run into the water, which means that if you're 2 hexes into water, you can't start running because you're in water and you can't change modes in the middle of running. So you have to walk.
Oh man, I have to be doing that completely wrong.
I'm sure we both have done that wrong at times.
Probably, well, not in the last game because there wasn't any water. But still. All right. Okay. But you can't. Yeah, this is kind of confusing. Though running mech may change facing in one. So may change facing in a water hex. And or move from a water hex to a land hex.
So if you're 1 hex into a water feature, you can start by running to turn face and then run onto the land that you're right next to.
Yeah, I'm going to go with you on that one. This is still, I'm going to say that this is still not worded very well.
I think that caffeine helps. It seems fairly clear, if not totally clear, but when you think it through with the rest of the rules that we know, it does make sense. But.
Right. I'm still going to clarify, but for now, yes, folks, that's what we're going to say.
Yep.
If you're in water next to land, you can run into the land, but you cannot run in the water.
Right.
Okay. Put it down in the comments. Tell us where we're wrong.
But we're not, because we can read. Jumping. Only mechs that possess jumping MP and are standing at the start of the turn may select this mode. They may then expend a number of MP up to their jumping MP. As jumping features numerous exceptions to the basic movement rules, see jumping movement on page 11 for the full details. Just to skip past that, jumping means you can just pick up and put mech where it goes. There's no terrain. There's no going up or down levels. There's no facing. You just pick up, put mech where he needs to go, facing whichever directions you want. That's pretty much the illustration on page 11.
That's not entirely true.
Mostly. I exaggerate for effect, but mostly.
So I was reading this in preparation for last week's stream that we didn't do. No, but there is a limit to how high you can jump.
Yes.
And so but we were, again, going back to the last game, we were just playing it. Oh, you can jump, it's unlimited. Like, assume you're going to orbit and coming back down, but that is not the case.
The limit is fairly high, if I recall, though, right?
No, I'm gonna skip ahead.
Is this where you tell me it takes a jump to go up a level?
No, it's where I tell you that and this is written horribly as well, and we'll get to it here in a little bit, but basically it's you ignore the terrain, but essentially you can only jump as many levels as jumping movement points you have. So say you have a jumping movement of 5, you can only go up to level 5. You can't go to level 10. We'll get there. We'll get there. It's in a few pages, so we'll get there, but it is also written very poorly.
Target number modifier as attacker +3. Target number modifier as target +1 plus a further modifier based on hexes traveled. See the attack modifiers table. Heat generated 1 heat point for every hex jumped. Using jump jets always generates a minimum of 3 heat points, no matter how far a mech jumps. Critical damage. If a mech uses jumping MP, each of the following forces a piloting skill roll to avoid falling upon landing. Loss of a leg, critical hit to the gyro, critical hit to a hip or any actuator in a leg location. Mechs lose 1 jumping MP for each jump jet destroyed.
Okay. All right. Real quick, I do want to mention this. All right. So movement dice, they recommend white, black, and red dice. And then you just use the number on it indicating, how many hexes that particular mech moved. However, let's switch to this. Oh, wait, nope, not that camera. That one. Ha! All right. Sorry, this is spoiler alert for future portions of the channel. All right. I do want to mention these, okay? Because this is what we use. I blame Skaz for getting them. These are Skaz's movement dice. Mostly because he leaves all of his stuff at my house. So, as you can see, you get white, black, and red. White for walking, black for running, red for jumping. These are from
Mr. Laser, otherwise known as Etsy. You can find them right there at that link to do that. I have 2 sets of those. They have been great.
Do you have the URL? Here, grab the link and put it in chat.
It's on the card.
Well, just so people... All right.
It did not let me post it.
Oh. Well, I did. All right. So that is one option for some of these. We'll get it. I'll show them off here in a second. I got this set. They're a little different. They've got more of a matte finish that I kind of like. but for all intents and purposes, they're the exact same thing. And this is from baronofdice.com. But you get a little set of, well, you got 15, I got 12. And I think you paid less than me too. But so here's how these work. All right, we are zoomed in all the way. So at the top of the die is you're going to rotate it based on
how far in hexes the mech traveled.
Correct. How many hexes the mech traveled. And then as you read all the way down, so the first modifier is what you as the attacker have to use. Okay, so if so when you walk, it's +1. When you run, it's +2. When you jump, it's +3. And then the second modifier on the bottom is that anybody targeting you, that's what they have to add to their targeting roll. And we'll get into all of this when we get into the combat. But I will admit, these are ridiculously useful, ridiculously convenient for, just a quick reference on the table, in order to see and very quickly, determine what modifiers you're going to have to deal with, in the game. So
I will add one reason why these are super helpful to anybody listening. It's because these dice are not regular dice. And what I mean by that is, even if you use the suggestion in the material we're reading, we use just white dice, black dice, and red dice for this, they're still dice. And so when you're moving through things, it's really easy just to scoop all your dice up and move them, and then all of a sudden you realize, oh crud, I just scooped my mech's movement dice away. How far did I move? I don't remember. And so there's no danger of doing that with these because they're not real dice, and the fact that you can't roll them to get a result, and it just makes it super clean. So it's a bit of pay for convenience, pay for ease, but it makes it super clean and easy for you to understand what's going on with each mech at a glance, and there's no danger of you losing them or moving them on accident.
And technically, you don't even have to do that. You could just be a smart person and remember, but not all of us are. So it's definitely something that we have found useful, but it is not required to play the game.
Correct.
So and then they even mention here, it's best to use dice of a different size and or color than those used for rolling attacks to prevent confusion. Let's be honest, it doesn't matter. You'll still get confused.
Right. One clarification to the rule set here that we have. The last line there says, after all weapons fires completed, remove all movement dice from the board. That is something that I don't recommend for a couple reasons. Because physical attacks can also take into account your movement modifier with that. And so if you do move everything after all weapon fires completed, you may have the physical combat phase where you may still need those dice. So we usually make a habit of clearing all those dice at the end of the actual turn, just to make sure we've got all the modifiers we need when we're playing. Just clarity.
Yeah, good call. So, all right, there we go. Put those away. Oh, and I should probably put. There we go. And there's the second link. So, oh, and I just realized I never said this. Hungar, thanks for becoming a member again. I always appreciate it. And folks, if you're interested, it's only $2. If you like what we're doing here, I won't turn it down, and it's better than a kick in the teeth. So, there we go. All right, movement basics. After being assigned a movement mode, a mech then spends the movement points provided. A mech need not spend all its movement points each turn, but no matter how few are spent, the mech's movement mode does not change. The movement points left at the end of the turn are lost, so you cannot bank them. There are different movement costs, and we'll get to those in a couple of minutes. All right, so facing every hex on the map has 6 edges called hex sides. Every mech must face one of those 6 hex sides. This is known as its facing. A mech faces the way its feet are pointing. Okay. That I don't like because of the way they've posed a lot of these miniatures.
Right.
They're a bit more dynamic, but the feet sometimes are pointing to like
An
the
angle.
point. Right. They're pointing to the angle between 2 hex sides as opposed to the actual hex sides.
Mm-hmm.
So my personal recommendation, well, there's a couple of options, and I don't have a mech in front of me. So, wait, nope, I do have one. Haha. You know what? Here, we're going to flip back to the other camera for a second. I know, super professional, folks. It's how we roll around here. All right, couple of things you can do. Number one, it's like this is my painted Prometheus. It's okay. But if you'll notice, I put just a little bit of paint. Me personally, I like to pick like one of the trim colors for it. But just put a little bit of paint on the hex side that you consider the front. Then it doesn't matter what direction your mech is facing. The paint is what's going to determine this is the front of the mech. Okay.
And by facing, you mean it doesn't matter which way the actual model is facing on the hex. You have the painted side there to show you which side is the actual front, even if it's not facing exactly in that direction.
That is a much better use of the English language than me. Thank you very much. But yes, that's exactly what I mean. So yeah, regardless of how the mech is positioned on its base, having a side painted like this, that's going to help you determine, oh, that's forward. Another simple trick, which you don't necessarily have to do. These are just some example hexes that I threw on, and I just put an arrow on it. You know, so hey, this is front. So it's not very complicated, but it is absolutely vital. It is absolutely important for playing the game. All right. Let's see. Changing facing costs 1 movement point per hex side. For example, in the diagram below, a 180-degree turn, 3 facings from hex A to hex B costs 3 movement points. Mechs not clearly facing one hex side at the end of the movement phase must be realigned to one of the 2 closest hex sides by the opposing player. Torso twisting. If a mech twists its torso, this only changes its weapons arcs, not its facing. That is something where you're going to want some kind of a marker, like your movement dice or something. If you want to indicate that you have basically torso twisting lets you change your firing arc by 1 hex side. So, if you wanted to, you could take your movement dice and put it on the hex that your mech is now facing. During a torso twist, or use some other indicator in order to know that your mech is not like right here. Technically the mech is facing A, but if you wanted it facing over here, well, you just need some kind of indicator so that you know why. All right. Ground movement. A mech can move forward into the hex it is facing or backward into the hex directly to its rear. It cannot move into any other hex without first changing its facing, as shown on the movement direction diagram at right. So that's this diagram. Basically, you can go forward or backward only, unless you turn, and then you can go to one of the other hexes. To enter a clear hex costs 1 movement point. Terrain in a hex often raises this cost. Partial hexes. Mechs cannot voluntarily move into or through half or quarter hexes. Mechs forced into such hexes are considered destroyed for the remainder of the scenario. So, and just to give a small description, basically what we are talking about is these hexes along the edge of your map, and then these hexes along the top and bottom. So if it's not a full hex, you cannot move into it. Okay. Let's see. Backward movement. A mech. Oh, I suppose I should put the book back on. There we go. A mech can only move backward if it uses its walking movement points that turn. Such a mech can move forward, backward, or both in the same movement phase. Mechs moving backward may not change levels. I was trying to think about why you would want to do that, and the only thing I could come up with was like, say there was like a little like pocket in a hill, and so you walk up, turn your facing and then back into it so that you can still shoot out, but
edge of a building that juts out that you want to shoot around. You're in one part, you're hiding behind the building, you back up and walk forward so you're able to shoot out from behind the building, something like that. So it's just there's an obstacle there that you want to get around effectively.
Right. So, all right. All hexes, terrain. All hexes cost at least 1 movement point to enter. However, terrain often raises this movement point cost as shown on the movement costs table. For example, entering a heavy woods hex costs 3 movement point. The base 1 movement point for entering any hex, and 2 movement points more for the heavy woods. So you're paying the 1 movement point for going the distance. You're paying 2 movement points for having to navigate around all of the obstacles. Difficult terrain. Entering a hex containing certain terrain types requires a piloting skill roll to see if the mech falls. Such information appears on the movement cost table. Water. If jumping into or out of water, see page 12. Otherwise, see movement in water. Level change. How often does this come up, Chris?
Yeah, on a regular basis.
Yes, level changes are constant, so make sure you're paying attention. We'll get into that when we bring the map back out. All right, when moving forward, a mech may change levels or depths by only 1 or 2 levels per hex at an additional cost of 1 movement point per level, whether up or down. Mechs moving backward may not change levels. Even a forced level change, as from a charge, push, or death from above attack, cannot force a mech into a hex 3 or more levels higher than the hex it was in immediately prior. However, a mech can be forced downward any number of levels. Being forced 2 or more levels lower results in an automatic fall. No mech may voluntarily fall from a greater level in order to circumvent the maximum allowable level change downwards. If a mech is forced into a hex that already has a mech, see displacement on page 40. Obviously, we'll get to that in a bit. So this is actually something that I don't think it actually came up, but I know we were talking about it a lot. Or at least I feel like we were talking about it in our last game.
Can't go 3 levels?
Yeah. And then or maybe it's just that when I was reading it. But it is one of the things to keep in mind. You can go up or down up to 2 levels, but that's it. But actually, here's another thing. I know you've probably done it in the past, but when was the last time you dealt with a mech getting pushed or falling?
Falling.
I mean, we've done falling in the same hex, but not
yeah. I've never had anybody push me off a building.
Yeah, we definitely need to play around with more of these rules.
I mean, we just never get into physical combat that often. I mean, I had in all of the last game that we played, I had 1 mech trying to physical attack.
Right, but why would we make physical attacks when we have PPCs that we can shoot in their face?
Because I hit them with my fist after I shot them with a PPC. You just have to be standing right next to them, which is harder for Innisphere to do because there's minimum ranges and stuff. We don't have that.
That's true. That's true. Seraph says someone doesn't play with Highlanders.
No, I don't play with a Highlander. No.
I did not punch you in the back, Curtis.
I did.
Oh. Okay. That actually is one complaint that I did have about that game. Is that it essentially turned into 3 separate games as opposed to one big kind of scrum like
Whose
we normally
fault
get.
was that?
That would be yours for saying 20,000 battle value per person.
No, that would not be my fault. Whose fault would that be?
I don't know how you're going to say this is my fault.
I'm not saying it's your fault. Well, it's kind of your fault. You were involved. But how about the guy that took to shooting, 45 LRM-15s at you every turn that took 30 minutes? That's how it devolved into 3 separate games. It's all his fault. You just had to stand there and take it.
That's very true. Serious note, folks. No, one missile boat per player only. Or you have to bring a box of death. One of the two.
That was painful. Painful.
I mean, I don't blame him. And it's Eric. He does that kind of stuff all the time. But still. All right. So, all right. So let's take a look at the movement cost table. Now, keep in mind, this is Battletech. Tables are ubiquitous and plentiful and abundant throughout the game. Yes, I was trying to come up with all the synonym words I could. But it is pretty important. The table itself actually isn't even that large.
No.
Like the official one. I know this one's a little more simplified for the starter box content. But even the regular movement cost table isn't much larger than this.
No, I mean, I don't think the regular one is as large as this because, for the basic rule set, they're giving you all the zeros as well. Whereas for the...
Oh, no, they're all listed.
On the card set?
Yeah.
I didn't think those were on there. I thought it would just give you the +1s and +2s. Because clear, you don't need to know that clear is +0. It's understood. It's just empty. A paved bridge is 0. It's empty. A road is 0, but there's a modifier to it as far as traveling along the if you're traveling along the road.
Now you got me curious.
I'm just talking about the cheat card, not the back of the book.
This is the back of the book essentially is the cheat card.
Okay, fine.
Anyways, yeah, movement cost table.
All right, fine.
Yeah, see, here's all the zeros.
Can you scroll back down to all the clan missiles? I like those.
This is clan weapons and equipment for battle armor. Thank you very much. Not missiles. I mean, there are some missiles, but still. Anyways, but yeah, so it's not that much more complicated. But yeah, so basically, to kind of overcomplicate it, folks, basically you're always going to essentially you just take this chart and essentially just walk down the list. You start with, okay, I want to go from one hex to another. Okay, it costs me 1 movement point. Okay, terrain cost when entering any new hex. Oh, it's clear. Okay, so +0. Or it's paved, it's a road, it's rough, light woods, heavy woods, etc. You just go down, find everything that applies, because you could have, like rough light woods, and so you just, for rough you have +1, and light woods you have +1, so you have +2.
Or you could travel through multiple pieces of terrain in your run. So I'd run through 1 light woods, 1 rough patch, 1 light woods, 1 heavy woods, and all of a sudden you picked up 4 modifiers to your MP when you just went 3 hexes. So you have a total of 7.
Right. So, exactly. And one of the things that I will say is that over time, you just learn it. Like there's enough woods on a map, there are enough rough spots on maps that you're going to encounter it relatively often and eventually you just start to figure it out, and it's really not that big a deal.
Right.
Let's see. So this I did think is interesting. Water, if you go into depth 2 right away, it's +3 instead of +2.
Yeah.
So I also
That's the MP to move along the bottom of the water hex. So that's not even the change in level. That's just to move on depth 2.
No.
Yeah,
Oh wait, oh no, level change movement points cost not included.
Look at the double star at the bottom. MP cost to move along the bottom of the water hex.
Okay, man, I should read like everything on the page. So yeah, so all right, so water at depth 1, you know, and it's rough, and you went down a level, you know, all of that stuff can, basically you just keep totaling everything up until,
you run out.
Right, until you run out. It does cost 1 movement point to drop to the ground. Costs 1 movement point per hex side that you turn. So if you want to turn all the way around, that costs you 6 movement points. And then if your mech is on the ground and you want to stand up, it takes 2 movement points.
Keep in mind that the standing up rule, that's just the basic standing up. So if you're also missing anything like we were talking about before, like a leg, that may take additional movement modifiers to try and stand up.
Right. So, okay. All right. I want to do this one, and then I'll let you take the I'll let you take the rest. But this one, because this one confused me, and my brain finally figured it out this afternoon. All right. Minimum movement. Did you know that there, like, outside of the fact that we read it 2 seconds ago, that there was a minimum movement rule? Did you know there was a minimum movement rule?
No.
Okay. So a mech can move into the hex directly in front of it, even if it does not have the movement points normally required. A mech can only do this if it meets all of the following conditions. It has at least 1 movement point to spend. It is not prohibited from entering the hex. Okay, so it's not, it's not 3 levels above you. It's not occupied by another mech. It's not, like there's nothing that would stop you from going into the hex. And such movement is the only movement point it expends that turn. Example, it cannot change its facing in the same turn. To enter a hex in this fashion, a mech must use running movement. Mechs using this rule can enter hexes that normally could not be entered by a running mech. For example, depth 1 or greater water hexes. And a prone mech with only 1 movement point available can make a single attempt to stand using this rule. Because again, as we saw on the table, it takes 2 movement points to stand up. All right, so when do you think you would use this, Chris?
I have no idea.
All right. You are standing next to some heavy woods. And for some reason, your mech, like whether, because that, like, don't you lose movement points like if you take damage to, say, like your hip actuators?
Yeah, you lose leg, you lose the hip, something like that. So you only have like 1 movement and you can't get anywhere there. It gives you the option to go ahead and get into a different hex.
Exactly.
Okay. That makes sense.
So that's the thing, is you have to have at least 1 movement point, and you're only going to 1 hex, and then it counts as a run, because not that you are running, but because, whether it's expending concentration or power or however you want to justify it in quote unquote real world terms. But that's why they're making it that way. And when I first read it, it was not clicking, but for some reason today I finally realized that. So anyways, minimum movement rule. Keep that in mind.
There you go. Shall we
What?
go to immobile?
Um,
Or are you seeing the chat?
I'm reading the chat. Seraphis is trolling me. He's still mad about the contract negotiations. All right, go ahead. Read us about an immobilized mechs.
Immobile. An immobile mech cannot make movements of any kind. Attacks against an immobile target apply a -4 target modifier, and an aimed shot, see page 21, can be made at the target. The following are immobile: buildings, hexes, mechs shut down, abandoned, missing all 4 limbs, or with an unconscious mech warrior. The following are not immobile: mobile mechs that choose to stand still, prone mechs, mechs missing 2 legs, mechs reduced to 0 MP by actuator damage and or heat, a mech with its gyro destroyed. Unless the situation specifically states that the target is immobile, it is not. When assigning movement actions, see movement phase, immobile mechs may still be selected even though they can do nothing but stand still. So we talked earlier about the benefit of declaring a mech to be stationary. A mech that can't move could be declared stationary and take up that slot in the movement phase, making it a nice tactical decision.
Yeah, and that, like, this right here, like, they're specifically laying down what is and is not immobile. Okay. Because that I think is kind of interesting, where you just say, "Oh, I'm standing still." Okay, well, standing still is not immobile. So, it again, folks, put it into terms of this is all happening at real time. Just because that mech is stationary does not mean it doesn't have a pilot that's, reactionary to what's happening on the battlefield.
Right.
So, you don't get these bonuses just because that mech didn't move this turn.
Right. And again, in game term, in simulation terms, each hex is 30 feet across. So the fact that you didn't move out of a hex's dimensions doesn't mean you couldn't be still somewhat moving around, even if it's not enough movement in game terms to move to the next hex.
Right. And it's 30 meters, not feet.
Sure. Piloting skill rolls. An immobile mech forced to make a piloting skill roll automatically fails unless it is prone. In which case, I guess it would automatically succeed because it's already prone. That's all right. Stacking. Yeah. At the end of the movement phase, after any mech is destroyed, but that phase that are moved from play, only one mech can be in any single hex. This is called the stacking limit, and no mech may deliberately violate it. If stacking rules are violated involuntarily, one of the mechs in the hex will be forced out of that hex. See displacement page 40. Jumping movement. Jumping features numerous exceptions to the movement rules. To jump, a mech must be standing at the start of the turn. A jumping mech can move one hex for each available jumping MP. Terrain does not affect this MP cost. If a hex is legal to enter, it costs 1 MP to move over or into it, period. A mech may jump into the same hex it began the turn in for 1 MP. A jumping mech ignores terrain in the presence of mechs in hexes it jumps over. As such, it does not need to make piloting skill rules if moving over hexes that normally force a PSR. However, it obeys the normal rules of the hex it lands in. A jumping mech also ignores facing. It can jump in any direction for the same MP cost, regardless of its initial facing, and when it lands, it chooses any facing desired. A mech with at least 1 jumping MP may jump down any number of levels. However, a mech cannot enter a hex with a level higher than its sum of its current jumping MP plus the level of the hex its jump began in.
Okay, there it is.
Yeah.
You can go down as far as you want. You can go up equal to the number of jumping movement points, which I know for a fact I effectively cheated in our last game because those buildings are like level 6,
Right.
and I did not have 6 jumping movement points.
Right.
So, but I wonder if that would go with the minimum movement rule.
Minimum movement rule means you have to be able to run. You have to run. You're talking about the ability to get onto it.
Yeah.
No, because it can't be prohibited from entering hex. See level change page 9. You can't go up 9 levels.
Right. Okay. Anyways, so if you have a jumping movement of 5 and you're on level 2, you can go to something that's level 7. That's the rule. But you can essentially leapfrog with that. Because all right, finish reading this and then I'm going to have some questions.
A mech can only jump to its destination hex via the shortest path, i.e. the fewest number of hexes required to get there. If more than one such path exists, the player chooses which of these paths the mech takes. If all such paths are illegal, for example, there's only one path and one of the hexes in the path is a level too high for the mech to enter via jumping, the mech cannot jump to the destination hex at all. Death from above. A mech cannot jump into a hex that already contains a mech unless it is making a death from above attack against an enemy mech in that hex. See page 26.
Hold up. Let's go back.
Sure.
Okay. So going back to our game. Okay, level 6 building. Well, I want to go you know what? There we go. All right. I want some help clarifying this. All right, this is not very clear, but we're going to deal with it anyways. All right. Let's say that my mech is here. And let's say that this is level 6 and this is level 4. Okay? So it's like it said like hold on.
The rules say you ignore intervening spaces you wish to jump over, meaning that if you were jumping from there to the land piece at the very top, nope, one over. If you're jumping to there, it would only take you 3 movement points because you ignore interspersing terrain.
Correct, but hold on.
If you want to land there.
But hold on. Say this hex is level 6.
Right.
Okay. And actually let's say that this hex is level 3 and this hex is level 6.
Okay.
Okay. So could I go 1, 2 on my jumping points because I have a jump movement of 5, and so this is only level 3, so it's still within it, and then continue my jump going from this hex to this hex, because even though this one is level 6, jumping from here, I'm only doing 3, it's only 3 up from there. Or do I have to stop once I get to this point to the level 3 hex? Because then once you land, then does your jumping end?
I would assume you would have to land on the 3.
But then I couldn't continue my jumping movement to get to the 6.
No, I don't think so. In the table that's in the part we skip past the jumping diagram, it talks a little bit about this, like the trees in Hex 5 rise 2 levels above the underlying terrain. They only rise level 3. Mech jump equals or exceeds that level. The mech cannot cross the path regardless of the height of the trees. The trees do not affect jumping, as such the player may choose path 3 or 4.
That's just talking about a different path.
Yeah, well, it's talking about possibilities of jumping in that way to get to a space. And that's where it's a good question. I don't know.
All right. Well, while we try to, we will research this and come back with information later, folks. In the meantime, I would say that like you get to the highest point you can, and then your movement ends, and then on your next turn you would move. So basically, landing cancels out any further jumping points you have.
I think that would make sense. Yes.
Okay. Well, next time we play, that's how we're going to rule it unless we figure out otherwise. All right, let's keep going.
All right. So let's see here. We did death from above. Into water. A mech cannot jump directly into water, depth 1 or deeper, but can end its jump over such a hex. If it does so, it must make a piloting skill roll. If the piloting skill roll succeeds, the mech is placed standing at the bottom of the hex. If it fails, the mech tumbles to the bottom instead, falling a number of levels equal to the hex's depth. Have the resulting damage round down.
Okay, so you're cutting your jump jets before you hit the water. But because you're cutting your jump jets,
you take a PSR.
Right, you're making an uncontrolled landing, so you have to make a piloting check. That is kind of a dumb rule.
I agree. Out of water.
Well, actually, no. Yeah, hold on. That's exactly what I was going to say. Read that.
Yeah. Jump jets cannot be fired while submerged. As such, a mech standing in depth 1 water may not fire jump jets in its legs. For example, a mech with a jumping MP of 5 that has 1 jump jet in each leg and 1 in each torso may only use 3 jumping MP when jumping out of depth 1 water.
So that's probably what they're getting at, is that you can't jump out of it with jump jets in your legs, and mechs almost always have the jump jets in the legs.
Most of them, yes. Some mechs have lots of jump jets, will have them in torsos as well, though.
Right. But that's what I'm saying. Just like typically you will see them in legs.
Right.
So that would be my guess. But otherwise, it's still a bit of a strange rule. Why would I cut my like the jets are blowing the water out?
Right.
Oh.
I don't know why they have that specified that way. Because you're right, it would seem to be perfectly safe to land in the water because the jets would blow the water away or boil it or whatever would happen to it. And then you just land and then the water comes back once you cut the jump jets off.
Right.
I don't know, unless it's just a game balance part where they don't want people to be jumping in and out of water all over the place, maybe.
Right. Well, and then I mean, and it's pretty simple. I mean, when you're moving into water, you'd have to make a piloting skill roll anyways.
Yeah.
And so it just
keeps it linear.
Yeah, it's a really
yeah,
it's a really clumsy way of writing it. I mean, you could just say, because it's like you can't jump into water depth 1 or deeper, but you can end your jump over the hex and then fall and make a it's like just no. If you're jumping into water, you make a piloting skill roll. They're way overcomplicating that.
Yep.
All right. Prone battle mechs. A mech might drop to the ground to take cover or be forced to the ground due to falls. Either way, such a mech is prone. Prone mechs rise 1 level above the underlying hex and are harder to hit with and against. A mech may choose to drop to the ground if it did not jump that turn. This creates no additional heat, causes no falling damage, and costs 1 movement point. The mech drops face down with the same facing it had while standing. To regain its feet, it must attempt to stand. Let's see. If a mech begins the movement phase prone, it must declare whether it will walk or run before it attempts to stand. While prone, it can only change its facing in the hex or attempt to stand. A mech may attempt to stand even if missing 1 leg or 1 arm and 1 leg or both arms. A mech missing both legs or 1 leg and both arms cannot. A mech may attempt to stand in the same movement phase that it fell, as long as it has enough movement points left and did not jump that turn. Each attempt to stand, successful or not, costs 2 movement points. The mech's pilot must make a piloting skill roll. If the piloting skill roll fails, the mech falls again. And takes additional falling damage as its initial face and possible pilot damage. Use the same facing it had on the ground as its initial facing when rolling on the facing after fall table. The mech may make repeated attempts to stand as long as it has the movement points required for each attempt. When a mech successfully stands, it may select any facing at no cost and may continue to expend any remaining movement points in that phase. Each attempt to stand creates 1 heat point. A prone mech with only 1 leg may still attempt to stand. However, it may only make 1 attempt per turn. This attempt to stand is always considered running and can still be made even though a mech with 1 leg can normally only walk. As an exception to the normal rules, only 1 piloting skill roll is ever made for this attempt, regardless of the number of piloting skill rolls that might be required by the action. All modifiers to this piloting skill roll are still cumulative, however. A prone mech with only 1 movement point is available can use the minimum movement rule to make a single attempt to stand. Don't fall over, folks. It's just easier that way.
It's just bad.
All right. Movement in water. Water hexes have a depth that functions as a level change. Mechs entering water hexes must pay the base 1 movement point for entering a hex, plus the movement point cost for entering water of that depth, 1 MP movement point if depth 1, plus the cost for any level change. Entering a water hex of any depth greater than 0 forces a mech to make a piloting skill roll. This includes moving between water hexes, but not standing up or making facing changes within one. Oh, so you're making a piloting roll for essentially every hex that you're moving in.
Yes.
Okay, we have not done that in the past.
Nope.
A mech standing in depth 1 water has its legs submerged and has partial cover. Underwater mechs are completely submerged. This means a depth 2 or deeper water hex if standing, or depth 1 or deeper if prone. Mechs cannot enter a depth 1 or deeper water hex while running. However, a mech can run and change facing in water and or move from a water hex to a land hex. Jumping to resolve jumping into and out of water. See jumping movement at left. So yeah, that is one thing I will point out. Not all water has depth. Like literally look at the map and it will be clearly marked whether it's depth 1, depth 2, etc.
I want to point out one thing there in that last section there. However, a mech can run and chase facing in water and or move from a water land to a land hex. Now, this is something which seems to go against what we read up above, saying that you could not run into water with that diagram, with that explanation we gave. However, what it's saying here, it says you can run and change facing in water, not move to a new hex, and or move from a water hex to a land hex. So if you walk into water on the turn before and you're on one hex of water, you can then run to turn around and get out of the water, but you can't run through the water going forward deeper into the water. Little something to clarify there, because it seems to say you can run in water if you miss a couple of those words there, which is easy to do.
Right. Okay. Yeah, this is definitely, we definitely need to get more real games in. But that's it. That's movement.
Now we get to the big section.
I mean, not tonight. We'll
No.
talk about combat next time.
Oh, yes.
But
next time we'll get to the big section.
Yeah, and that's the thing. Like a lot of this, what I would definitely recommend to people is look at this in a in a sort of a module kind of setup. Don't think of it like, like you have to have all of this memorized. Worry about, okay, you know what, I'm going to jump. Okay, go read the jumping rules. Like if you don't have any mechs that jump, or if you're just playing with like some super basic stuff, ignore all the jumping rules. You're not going to need them anyways. So, occupied hexes, if you're, skip try, don't try to walk through friendly mechs. And then guess what? You can completely ignore that rule, but don't be afraid to like, break this into chunks if you're trying to learn the game. So that you can be, so that you're not going to get overwhelmed, because, even this book is about 60 pages. Whereas if we look at this one, we've got, over 300 pages, including charts and tables and whatnot. And this is like the regular Battletech rules.
Yes. Lots of pictures.
Right. Lots of pictures as well. But regardless, it's still, a lot more information.
Yes.
So, cool. Anything else?
I don't think so. I mean, movement is an integral part of the game, as we talked about before, where, you want to move around to get better shots, to get into ranges, and to do, be able to see as well, as terrain can block your vision. So it's a very big part of the tactics of the game. Whereas gunnery, which gets all the love, is more of a, luck-based part of the game, because it's just dice rolling at that point. So movement is really going to set your game up for success, as far as maybe not being able to be shot back while you can shoot your opponent. Whereas shooting is just the act of actually trying to get it to do what you want it to do. So learn movement and you'll be successful in playing the game, even if your dice rolls aren't as great in the shooting phase.
Yes. I literally could not have said it. I mean, like, I truly could not have said it better than that. Like, it is kind of interesting how much, how much movement does, play into the game. Seraphis brings up this one. He says, "Tell everyone how you use a battle master, Brian." He is talking about how I play the Harebrained Schemes Battletech game, where the joke is that I punch everything with my face. But even that really comes down to, if you're not paying attention to the movement, you're generating excess heat, or you are putting yourself into a situation where, you think that you're being sneaky and you're trying to hide in all the trees. Well, then you just set yourself up where you can't shoot the guy because, you blocked yourself. So, it's the movement rules are not that complicated, but
they're detailed, but they're not complex in most cases.
Right, exactly. But they are absolutely crucial to making sure that that the game, the game is going to hinge a lot on your movement, as opposed to your shooting rules.
Post the comment right above the one you posted before, the one for Curtis.
Punching
that
you in
one.
the back?
Yes, I ran a mech around behind him because he'd lost initiative. I ran a mech all the way around behind him, shot him with a bunch of medium lasers straight in the back, and then punched him in the back. I did that because of movement, not because of shooting. Movement allowed me to get there to do all of that. And that's the illustration I'd like to leave you guys with, why movement is so important, because I put myself in a position where he couldn't shoot me, and I could shoot everything I wanted at him and then punch him in the back. That's the power of movement right there.
Yeah, exactly. And then, also paying attention to, like what order you're moving the models in, like, because yes, there's an initiative order, but like, especially if you're playing with say 4 mechs on a side. Okay. Well, the order that you move them is absolutely important. And, it can absolutely, tie into whether you get to react to his movement or he has to react to yours. So, especially as we play more, I'm really seeing how movement is absolutely crucial to the game. So
Right. And the nice thing about it is, even though we talked about how important movement is to the game, and to highlight Brian's point here, the mech that I ran around Curtis to punch in the back with was always the last one I moved, because I wanted Curtis to move as many of his mechs around so I could put my mech in the exact right position to do the damage I wanted. That all being said, sometimes movement isn't as important. In general, it is, but there are some mechs that can sit there and just slog it out and take punishment and just say, I'm not going to mess with moving around a whole lot because I don't have much movement to begin with. That's going to be when you're getting up into those higher weight classes and your assault mechs are going to move 3-5, or if you're taking an annihilator 2-3 or that sort of thing, where they can't move much anyways. That's a tactical choice you're making in your mech selection, which is going to hamper you in some ways, but give you additional options in other areas, such as massive firepower in the shooting phase. So it's another great illustration of how deep and complex this game is, despite appearing very simple on the tin, because you can really choose to highlight various phases of the game while not illustrating as much in other ways, and really getting to play the game you want to because you do that.
Exactly. So cool. Well, now that Ogre showed up, I think it's time to go. Sorry, Ogre, I couldn't resist that one. So I guess yeah, I mean, folks, it's absolutely, interesting. You're gonna see as we go through the rest of the rules, see how it all starts coming together. You know, it's absolutely like there's a reason that we still love playing this game, 40 years on. So all right. Well, with that said, no, to Ogre, it's not anything you said. I'm just being a dork because literally we just, got to the end of the show. But at this point, folks, don't forget, if you and we appreciate it, Ogre. We really do. Thank you. But folks, if you enjoyed the show, please do give it a thumbs up. Make sure you're subscribed to the channel. We will be back next week unless, Chris comes up with some other, reason he wants to play hooky again. But we will keep doing this, and we're gonna get through these core rule books, and then we'll start branching into some other stuff. Have some more fun with this. So, anyways, thanks for watching. And
Like and subscribe.
Right, like, subscribe, all that fun stuff, and we will talk to you next time. Bye, everybody.